You are listening to the Casting Shadows Podcast, RPG A Day 2023 edition. Now don't panic. RPG A Day is, at its heart, a daily endeavor. And, luck holding, I'll be releasing daily responses on the Casting Shadows blog. That's text posts. I just feel like doing it in text this year rather than audio or video. However, I will be making summary posts here on the podcast and there on youtube.com/runeslinger. But this is the first day of RPG A Day 2023, and so this aggregate collection of ideas is going to happen on this first day just to help get the ball moving and get momentum in motion. Normally, I'll be posting these at the end of the week, so there may be quite a gap between this and the next one, but we'll see. Anyway, welcome to the Casting Shadows blog, and welcome to RPG A Day 2023, our 10th anniversary, where we are going back to the original prompts, updated for this anniversary edition, with a hope that those of you who have done this event many times in the past will find some fun in trying to balance your responses to look at what you thought 10 years ago or beyond and compare that to what you're doing now. But anyway, without further ado, let's get on with the episode. Let's take a little longer on this first response to kind of illuminate exactly how it all works. Now, it doesn't matter how you respond, meaning it could be Twitter or X or whatever that ends up being. It could be some kind of short text-based post that you release, or it could be an image, or it could be a video, or it could be a scene that you act out with friends. It could be long form or short form. It could in some way be interpretive dance. Who can say? That part is on you and your creativity. The question itself is the first RPG played, which is the original question, and then parenthetically it includes this year. Now you can kind of tack that on to any of the 31 prompts this year. It just doesn't always fit in the box, right? So the first RPG played, possibly this year, and the other element is that first has been highlighted. So maybe that question doesn't really speak to you. Possibly you're in a rut and you haven't played any games this year, which is tragic and not positive and not something to think about. But first is something that we could apply to many things. So we can respond with the first RPG ever played, the first RPG played this year, or some positive RPG topic related to the notion of first. Okay, now there are several prompts throughout RPG A Day 2023 that tie into the notion of first something. So take a look over all of them to make sure you don't make another day harder by your first instinct on what you want to talk about today. So, first RPG played for me was BX, the Moldvay version of basic Dungeons & Dragons. It was also the first RPG product I was ever given. And it's also the first RPG that I ever ran. A lot of firsts tied in to that. The first one I played this year turns out to be Alien, as we were finishing off our Colonial Marines campaign. That was pretty cool. And that led us into playing Blade Runner, which I thought would be the answer to question 3. But you'll have to hang around for question 3 to find out about that. Okay. That wraps up the response for first RPG played this year. Prompt number 2. First RPG Game Master. And in this prompt, Game Master receives the bold treatment. So you could answer about first RPG Game Master ever, your first RPG Game Master this year, or you could go off on a direction all your own about game mastery, or game masters, that sort of thing. Be positive. So, my first RPG Game Master was a classmate. And we recognized, as we were going from one grade to the next, that we were not going to be sharing any classes. And so, my buddy invited me into his D&D group. And it's a good thing he did. That's all I'll say on that. But that enabled us to stay together, gave us a way to connect through the very difficult years of junior high and high school, and met some good people, had some incredible fun. We weathered the satanic panic together, and it's the gift that keeps on giving, because I'm still playing these games 40 years. This is my 40th year as a role-playing gamer with no interruptions. So, what a tremendous introduction. Now, on the written blog, there's more detail to this story, as well as a curious addendum about a second introduction, but I'll leave that for that. So, my first RPG Game Master was a fellow classmate who had older brothers who dumped their game stuff on him, and by virtue of their generosity and his generosity, I have had this incredible part of my life for 40 years. Welcome to day 3. It's not really day 3. Of course, this is still day 1, and I'm recording these in advance, and you know that because possibly you're listening to this on day 1. So there's no mystery or surprise. But later on in the month, these will be an aggregate of posts that I link together as I have time to make them during the week, and then share them all at once in a properly digestible amount. I'm thinking I'll be doing 10 posts per release. Okay, so day 3 is the first RPG bought, parenthetically, this year, with bought being the word in bold. So I thought that this would be Rivers of London. And then I thought, well, maybe not. Maybe that would be Blade Runner. But turns out they were both purchased at the end of 2022, and they arrived at the beginning of 2023. So it turns out the first game that I actually purchased in this calendar year was the update to Broken Compass, a game called Outgunned. All right. Just as exciting, just as full of amazing and appropriate and consistent, thematically consistent art as Broken Compass, and then some. So I'm looking forward to it arriving later in the year. Two Little Mice, the group that put Broken Compass together, has a tremendous track record for envisioning products, producing products, and then getting them out to people. And so, yeah, Outgunned. It's something to be excited about, even if you already have Broken Compass. All right, that was my first RPG bought this year. On the written blog, there are more firsts. I waxed, not poetic, but I talked a lot more on the written blog, which should surprise no one, about other firsts. And you can check that out if you're so inclined. Day 4 is the most recent game bought, which doesn't really need the parenthetical edition of this year, and so it doesn't have it. The most recent game bought. This could be at any point in time. Perhaps in your life you've only purchased one game, and that was like 17 years ago. That's still the most recent game that you have bought. So let's hear awesome and positive things about it. But for me, this was just last week. No, 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I bought Rectify, which is a solo horror journaling RPG produced by Hansor Publishing, who also put out the Gaia Complex, which I like a great deal. And it's a very unusual game that I don't want to say more about. I have written a blog post about it, and I've talked about it on the Third Floor Wars podcast, where we were talking about RPG a day. I talked about it there, so I don't want to say more, because I think reading it and discovering it is a real part of its process. But I think that, if you're at all curious about solo games, if you enjoy, blogging and vlogging and writing and doing recaps, if you get into that aspect of role-playing games, then there may be something in a journaling game that appeals to you. And the way that this game works is fascinating. And there's a lot to say about it. But not here for RPG a Day. So, the most recent game that I bought was on Kickstarter by Hansor Publishing, called Rectify. I have the full game because I was given an early review copy. The game is finished, and we're just waiting for it to be printed and distributed, which is the way that all good Kickstarters should go. If you have any doubt about how to run a great Kickstarter, check out any run by Hansor Publishing. Top-notch, amazing management skills. Okay. The fifth prompt for RPG a Day 2023 asks us to think back to the oldest game that we've played. Doesn't matter when we've played it, just chronologically, it was the first produced, and you've played it. This isn't one that you've read. This isn't one necessarily that you own. The oldest that you've played. And so, this is pretty interesting. So I've played old games, but in newer editions, so they don't count. What would be the oldest game that I've played? Playing RuneQuest and using the BRP system pushes that envelope way back in time. But at the moment, the oldest game that I have actually played would have to be the Holmes version of Basic Dungeons and Dragons, being released in '77. If I had played the first edition of Tunnels and Trolls, which I haven't, then that would be my answer. If I'd played OD&D, then that would be my answer. But I haven't. So the oldest version, not that I think I played Holmes D&D in a very pure way. I'm absolutely positive it suffered from cross-pollination with different procedures and ideas from Moldvay, completely unintentionally. But there you have it. That is the oldest, currently, game that I've played. If I get the chance to play first edition Traveler, that might at least tie with this. And if I take Tunnels and Trolls out for a spin, that will certainly count. But yeah, that's interesting to think about. Oldest game. Now, this ends our fifth day, and so I think I will put in a little note about RPG a Day right here. To get the infographic that I'm drawing the prompts from, you can visit my blog at CastingShadowsBlog.com and look at the pinned post and get the infographic for yourself. Has all the questions, has all the explanations, has a link to a friendly video, has links to other years' videos about all of this, and that will sort out any questions that you have, I'm sure. You can also go to the Autocratic blog. That's Autocratic, spelled normally until you get to the very last letter, when instead of a C, You're going to use a K, autocratic.com, and that is the founder's website, and you'll find that same information there too. Right? Now, each of these prompts can be interpreted, because it's our 10th anniversary, from looking at things how they were in 2014 when this event started, or looking at things now, or both. Or, instead of answering the question per se, you can take the bold word out of each prompt and use it to spark your own positive spin on role-playing games. Anyway, enough for this kind of product identification. Let's get on to day 6. The prompt for day 6 talks about a favorite game that you never get to play. And the emphasized word in this prompt is never. The way this prompt is striking me this time, compared to other years, is there's lots of games that you enjoy. This time I want to interpret playing a little more strictly than I normally do. I think of playing the game as being inclusive of what the game master does and what the people with characters do. But this time, I want to restrict that application for myself, for this prompt, to running characters. Because it strikes me that some of my most favorite games are also the ones that I prefer to be the game master. Right? Not running characters. And at a certain point, after a certain number of years of running a game, I wonder if it doesn't start to feel like that's normal, and that's the way that the game feels in play. That's what's comfortable. That's what's thrilling and exciting. Like, that's what you look forward to. And, maybe the games that you usually run as a game master, in certain cases, are a result of it being, that's the really good match between you and this game, And the reason why you haven't, put your foot down and said, I want to play this time, someone else run the game, is that that's the thing that you're really looking forward to. You're not being trapped in the role of game master of this game. You are reveling in it. You are coming home to it. So that's what kind of struck me. So in answering, like a game that I love but I never get to play is basically Call of Cthulhu would be the first example that comes to mind. There are lots of others, things that I really like to play, things that I would step forward and say, yeah, I'll run that, rather than, yeah, let's play that, or I've got a character idea, something like that. So yeah, using Call of Cthulhu as an example, putting aside some trips into Delta Green and some trips into Leagues of Cthulhu and games that are similar, I haven't run a Call of Cthulhu character myself, in this century. I don't think I could put a date on when that was. Right? I ran it for a long time before I ever got a chance to play it, like years before I got a chance to play it. And then, basically, other than a few moments here and there, that's the way it's been. And while that can often sound like a negative, I'm realizing, answering this question, how much of a positive that really is. Our dog Kobe has chosen this moment to stop his hunger strike for the day. He didn't eat breakfast, so now he's having breakfast. It's almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. In the middle of this moment, this realization, he starts crunching away here next to me. So I'm going to leave that in because I'm going to enjoy listening to it later. But anyway, I've said many times before that finding Call of Cthulhu was like finding my voice as a game master. And I think that was an incredibly powerful and important experience in my life for this hobby. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And maybe this is just one of those signs that I never even choose to just play it. Anyway, next day. Welcome to this segment. This is the 7th segment For RPG Day 2023, this is the prompt for Day 7, which is a good time to talk about a tip for these posts. Interpretation is everything. And there are some prompts sometimes which in some moments in our lives strike us as confusing. Like, what did they mean by that? And from a certain point of view, from a very real point of view, it doesn't really matter what we may or may not have meant. It only matters what positive reaction you can have to it in regard to role-playing games. So when you see something, how do you interpret it? And what positive message do you want to share with other gamers about it in relation to your gaming life? And so the prompt for today is the smartest RPG you've played. And there's lots of interpretation that we could apply to smartest. We could talk about the writing, or we could talk about the design in terms of, not only how it was put together, like mechanically, it shows a lot of intelligence behind it, but also we use smart to talk about how good something looks or how well someone is dressed. So this could be a layout question or a page design question. There's a lot more to it than simply talking about what we could have possibly meant by smartest. So, thinking recently, a game that really struck me about how well it was put together and what I enjoyed interacting with it about on several levels. Different impulses come to mind. I think about Blue Planet, which draws on a real understanding of science to inform its fiction. I think about The Laundry RPG, based on the Laundry Files, for the way it draws in this sense of horror from the books, from the mundane paperwork and training and human resources nonsense that make up so much of our lives. And how it puts us in a frame to be able to bring that actively into play. I think about the time travel game Continuum, which has definitely busted a few heads out there with the way it approaches the topic. And I think it's important to mention Burning Wheel for the way that it breaks down the subject matter and directs you not only in learning how to play the game, but in looking at gameplay as consisting of specific pieces. And so I think for a little variety, for a this year kind of mood for my response, but in keeping in mind these other older impulses I have for responding to this prompt, I think I want to talk about the Modifius game Dune, the 2D20 version of Dune, in the way that it lays out two different layers of play for the players, right? It's a troop style game, but their characters are, asymmetrical in terms of how they work. And the game is very open about talking about its mechanisms of play and is relying on the skill and passion and interest of its players to learn how to integrate that into their play in a way that allows them to shift fluidly between these two different levels of play. I find it fascinating, and I would say that currently, I think it's the smartest RPG I've had a chance to play. The prompt for Day 8 asks about our favorite character. Again, that could be this year. Maybe you play a lot of different characters. Or it could be ever. or it could be from 2014, the first year of RPG A Day, or all of those. Doesn't really matter. It's what you feel will be fun to talk about. For me, I get my strongest connection to characters I get to play for a long time, such as in a lengthy campaign. And so the first time I had an opportunity to answer this question, I talked about a character from the White Wolf game Aberrant. It was part of the adventure Aberrant and Aeon/Trinity series of science fiction / pulp heroics / superheroes game that I really liked. And that character that I talked about, and the records of that still exist, so I won't go into it here. That character is still a favorite. Also, a long-term character that I've played and got to play out so far the entire campaign online, so it's all recorded and can be revisited at any time, is one I made for All for One Regime Diabolique, our Lights and Darkness campaign, where I play the musketeer Martin Martel. And really enjoy him. I got to explore a lot of things that I wanted to do in the game by virtue of it being round-robin play, having multiple game masters, and it lasting for years. And sometimes we play a lot, and sometimes we play a little. So it's an enduring character, and one that I still feel a very strong connection to. And more recently than that, a character that I've grown very attached to, and I'm attached to the concept of the character, meaning I would probably try to do it again in live play, a different version of that theme, if we got to play around the table, or at least play through Hangouts or through Messenger or whatever. Is this spy that I'm playing, named Nathaniel Ribbon. I've been playing for years in play-by-post. And there's something about just the core concept that went into making the character that appeals to me, that I would like to get a stronger dose of from live play rather than play-by-post play. And there's something in general about the concept of the spy which appeals to me, which I'm not exactly sure that campaign is set up to meet, because it's not about being a spy. It's just an addendum. It's an interesting detail. But a campaign about spies, being spies, spying, I think is something that I'm leaning toward somehow in some system, either as a game master or as a player. I'm not really sure yet. But to answer this question, favorite character, these days, it's something like a spy, and not the James Bond can do anything kind of character, but the unobtrusive character can pass without notice and collects information, has strong beliefs, strong sense of right and wrong and that sort of thing, and is willing to put their life on the line to fulfill that. There's something about that I feel particularly drawn to in these dark times. Okay, so that is my answer for prompt number 8. The word in bold today, of course, was character. I'm almost positive, yes, I'm positive, that the answer I gave in the first RPG a Day to question number 9, or prompt number 9, favorite dice, was a set that I had 3D printed in stainless steel when that was a very new thing. There's a company called Shapeways, which really wasn't about doing game stuff, but there were people who had already put up ways to do 3D printed dice in a variety of interesting materials. And so I got this thorn kind of design in stainless steel, and they were my favorite dice for quite a while. But then, as I have a lot of dice, slowly they were pushed into a revered, but maybe not favorite position. They roll well, but they're extremely light, and I prefer a heavier die, really, when it comes down to it. Not too heavy, but heavier. And I managed to get a set of dice from the dice store online in a material called howlite, which is really common near where I was born and many of the places where I grew up. And I like how they look. I like how they feel. I like the texture of them. The weight is perfect. The particular design of them speaks to me directly. You can see a video of them on my channel. And it's just, those are, at least currently, my favorite dice. Retroactively, ever. But at least since I got them. Day 10. Prompt 10 for RPG A Day 2023, the 10th anniversary edition. And this 10th prompt will be the last in the sequence of combined prompts that I'll be doing for the first 10 days of RPG A Day 2023. Look for separate day-by-day posts. Sometimes the answers will be the same. Sometimes they'll have more detail. Sometimes they'll be completely different on the written blog. And posts similar to this for the YouTube channel. All right. The prompt for day 10 is favorite tie-in fiction. Now, this isn't one that I can actually answer the question for. I don't really have favorite tie-in fiction. Chaosium at one time produced a whole series, of reprints of Cthulhu mythos short stories, themed, right? So it was themed by, quote, monster, end quote. Like they had the Cthulhu cycle and the Nyarlathotep cycle and things like that. So all the stories were by authors who had written about, whatever was in the title. They also grouped them together by authors. It was a really nice way to collect a lot of very relevant and interesting stories together if you were a fan of the Cthulhu mythos, of Call of Cthulhu, or whatever. It was an easy way to get them. It wasn't really tie-in fiction, though. Really, the game is a tie-in to the fiction, if you see what I mean. And I've never really been one to read a lot of tie-in fiction. I've read some BattleTech novels, but I don't gravitate toward them. Haven't read any Star Wars tie-in fiction, or I've only read one Star Trek tie-in fiction, that kind of thing, right? So it's not really where my interests lie. So instead of trying to find favorite tie-in fiction, I'm going to focus on the bold word today, which is fiction. I'm going to share a series tied to my favorite character answer from day 8 instead. So the author is L.E. Modesitt Jr., and he's a very prolific writer doing science fiction, doing fantasy, and doing a little bit of speculative fiction. And it's a speculative fiction series that he has done that I'd like to recommend once again for RPG A Day, but in a different context. And this is the Ghosts of Columbia series. There are 3 titles in the series. There's a collection called Ghosts of Columbia, which has the first 2. But the first novel in the series is Of Tangible Ghosts. The second is Ghosts of the Revelator. And the third is Ghosts of the White Knights. And the main character is, as you may have guessed if you heard the day 8 answer, is a retired spy in a world where ghosts have always been real, and the creation through warfare, for example, of large numbers of them has put a damper on how war works in the world, and therefore world history is not our world history. So it's historical, speculative fiction with a little bit of science thrown in. Of course, as all good science fiction should be, with a point toward commenting on how our world works or maybe doesn't work. So I really enjoy the characterization of the main character, Johann Eschbach, and what he does. And he's similar to many of Modest's protagonists, but is refreshingly different also. And there's a nice balance between what might be secondary characters in other fiction, like might be one-off NPC type characters in play that are given more life and become more important as the character changes as a result of his experiences. I think it's a very subtle thing that often gets missed. So it's compelling spy-related mystery, there's action, and there's more. So I would recommend this series as some favorite fiction, and it's certainly fiction that I have and will continue to tie in to my own play. And that's how I'll answer the prompt for today. And this brings this episode of the podcast to an end, this summation of the first 10 days of RPG A Day 2023. It's my intention that these will come at the end of the relevant periods rather than at the beginning of the relevant periods. So although today's the first day of RPG A Day as I release this and you're getting the first 10 prompts all at once, I won't be releasing this again on day 11, I don't think, unless I get a sense that I'm going to need to in order to meet my schedule. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, if you've come this far, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. I hope you yourself are also posting in response to RPG A Day 2023. I hope you're putting the hashtag on it so that people can find it. I hope that you're following the hashtag to find other people's posts. And above all, when you find a really cool one, I hope you let them know. And I hope you share it. Anyway, until the next RPG A Day 2023 post, or until the next time I post, take care. You've been listening to the Casting Shadows podcast. To get in touch with us on this topic or others, please check the information provided in the show notes.